Hello, I'm David Breeden, Senior Minister at First Unitarian Society of Minneapolis, and this is Coffee and Wisdom Summer Style when we are live on Tuesday and Thursday mornings at 9 a.m. For the past couple of weeks, I've been looking at what I'm calling yes way, no way, and that is the uses of practical philosophy, not the kind that we think about why are we here, but rather how do we get through our day, which are kind of different questions, really. I brought up the concept from Aristotle that there are three ways of thinking about this practical philosophy. Theoria, yeah, that's theory. That's when you're just thinking up in your head and discussing these things. But Aristotle then says you've got to put it into praxis. All of these words from Greek we do recognize because they come into ideas in the English language. Praxis is doing. And then Aristotle thought doing and doing becomes then a habit, which is poiesis. It creates a life then. It creates an object in the world by doing this consideration, theoria, practice, 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 and then actually living in that habitual way. And Aristotle thought that the way to do that is to consider all the time, what is virtue? What does virtue mean for me in this particular moment, in particular way of doing things? I've mentioned that the Stoics, especially in the Western tradition, have been very much about practice, practice, practice. Practical philosophy. And that's why all over the net, you can find all kinds of daily readings for Stoicism, handbooks, spiritual exercises, etc. Now, if you've been in the world of spirituality for a while, you know that this is a fairly new idea. I mentioned the first book really to bring this back on Tuesday. That was from 1995. So not so long ago, but fairly recently. But part of this is that the Stoics did have exercises in much the same way that the Buddhists did. And Buddhism has really, as we know, taken root in the US, as has yoga, as practices, although it's really debatable, and we've gone over some of the history of this over time in Coffee and Wisdom. How much do Westerners in the cultural matrix of the Western world really understand Buddhist principles? It's an open question. And also, and you can read this asked everywhere on the net, again, is has Buddhism developed into a Western religion or a Western philosophy among Westerners, especially in the UK and the United States, or not, or should it? And these are open questions that no one, I think, has definitively answered at the moment. You have no doubt seen, as you have gone around on the net, this little spoked wheel. This is the Eightfold Path symbol from Buddhism. And as you go around, you start at the top, a right view, then right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right concentration, and right mindfulness. Now, these are translated in various ways around on the net because these words don't exactly come into English. Yet another of the problems with this kind of thinking. Now, where does this come from? Well, there are four noble truths within Buddhism. These are right up front. As the Buddha said, I teach one thing and one thing only, that is suffering and the end of suffering. As I've said before, we're not talking physical pain here. We are talking mental anguish. The four noble truths are that there is this, and then this is how you can get out of it. So dukkha is the truth of suffering. It's how we live because we are simply born into a world where human beings are in mental anguish. It's part of the nature of being a human being. Again, the Buddha doesn't ask why, just look around you and clearly that's the way it is. But then we have to think about, so the truth of suffering, we do suffer. And then what is it that is causing that suffering? Let's figure out, if we can, what the source of it is. Now, notice here that what the Buddha is doing is going through these ideas as if he were a physician. And that is the idea of Buddhism, is that we are looking at a physical condition that can be fixed. And this is the medicine. So the truth of suffering, the truth of the cause of suffering, then the truth of the end of suffering, how we can get done with suffering, at least within limits, because suffering is just going to keep coming up every day. And then the truth of the path. And the fourth noble truth is that the suffering that the Buddha is talking about can be ended by practicing this eightfold path, those 8 spokes of the Buddhist wheel. Again, one of the ways of thinking about this is that the path breaks down into 3 sections. One is wisdom, another is ethical conduct, and then mental development. Wisdom, we've talked about a lot. This goes through most of the traditions that are not about monotheism in the world, from Taoism to shamanism, etc. And that is right view, the way to see reality, and right intention, the right way to deal with what we see as reality. Then ethical conduct, right speech, right action, right livelihood, which is an interesting one, that the idea is that we do choose the right thing that we do in the world to make our living. And that's debatable whether most people get a choice on that one, but that's where the Buddha is. And then the mental development, which is the practice, the daily practice, as Stoicism also talks about, of staying centered in this way to avoid suffering. And that comes through right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. Right? Now, how do we make this a little more concrete? Well, right speech comes from the Buddha, this little quote: better than 1,000 hollow words is one word that brings peace. Now, the Buddha says peace in that blank there, not truth, notice. So it is interesting that the Buddha is not driving toward virtue or truth so much as, again, this escape from suffering. So it's beginning in a slightly different place than Greek and Roman philosophical traditions really begin. So what is right speech? Sama vaka. It contains 4 aspects. Abstinence from false speech. Don't lie, right? Second is abstinence from slanderous speech. Statements intended to divide or create enmity between people. No, you want to always be promoting friendship and comradeship and peace. The third is abstinence from harsh speech. That's angry, bitter, those things that drive people away rather than bring them in. And then the fourth, abstinence from idle chatter, gossip. And we've looked at that before as an idea that let's not talk about people, let's talk about ideas instead, say the great religious and philosophical leaders of the world. So that's the 4 elements of right speech. Tell the truth, don't exaggerate, don't gossip, and then use helpful language. Tell the truth, don't exaggerate, don't gossip, and use helpful language. And again, if you've been following the past 2 weeks, you know that the Toltec wisdom that I started with, these 4 agreements are very much like these. And again, that's because these are about practice, everyday practice in the world, what we need to do from moment to moment to stay without suffering and in some kind of virtuous position. Now, this does tie back to good old-fashioned Stoicism. I know you've heard this quote before. It's usually attributed to Epictetus, who we've talked about quite a bit. Actually, Epictetus appears to have been quoting his teacher, Zeno, an earlier Stoic, we have two ears and one mouth, therefore we should listen twice as much as we speak. And yeah, that's not a bad thing to remember in all moments of our lives. And yeah, it has at this point become a cliche, but it is one of the basic foundational ideas within Stoicism is that we are going to listen more than we are going to pontificate. Epicurus also said this: if God listened to the prayers of men, all men would quickly have perished, for they are forever praying for evil against one another. So that's one way that Epicurus, anyway, thought, the gods do not interfere in human life. We know this because all the nations are praying that God will smite the other ones. Abraham Lincoln, during the American Civil War, used this idea to talk about, no, we don't really want God on our side. We want to be on the side of God, which is a very different thing. And Lincoln did indeed read the Stoic and Epicurean philosophers. So I think the summary here is what Marcus Aurelius, he often says things probably in the most lapidary, aphoristic way. He said this: if anyone can convince me that my thought or action is wrong, I will change happily, because I am a seeker of the truth, which can injure no one. The injured are those who live in error. Again, it's debatable. How much should we do white lies to help people feel a little bit better about themselves in the day? Yeah, that's a good question. And I don't think Marcus Aurelius would say always tell the truth. Because indeed, he also says, as does the Buddha, let's produce social action, use sociology, being better with each other in the world, compassion, as we would probably say it in contemporary American English. So he's not going to go around saying, you're this, you're that, and that's what I think. No, the idea is that I am going to live according to truths that I see as truths. And actually, I'm real happy to be told that the truths I'm following are not those truths, because the worst thing to do is to live in error or in lies, as he calls it in other places. So I think that is probably where most of the practical philosophy, the good life philosophies, as we tend to call the non-monotheistic theological ideas, I think that's pretty well where most of them end up. We do want to somehow get at truth and right action in the world. That's it for this week. I hope you have some things to think about. Always, there's a lot of things to find on the internet about Stoicism, and certainly the Eightfold Path. You can spend quite a bit of the day doing some research only online about these ideas. And of course, the Fourfold Path of the Buddha. And as I'll be talking a little bit about next week, what's known in the Western world as the tetrapharmacon, the four ways that we can get over our human suffering, which is a little different than Buddhism, but it's also, again, in that good life philosophy. Next week, I'll be talking about the self-abstracted. Again, I want to follow this idea that we can live a little bit above the ground in some ways, and that this gets particularly dangerous as we go forward in the world, because we've got a little too much abstraction going on. Perhaps the monthly theme this month at First Unitarian Society is play, and we're looking at various aspects of that over the month. And I will see you on Sunday morning at 10:30 a.m. or next week, Tuesday at 9 a.m. Central Time for more of our summer Coffee and Wisdom. Thank you.